So we're going to pick it up on chapter 30 of the Circle 7 Quran, divinely prepared by Noble Jew Ali, titled Instructions from the Prophet, dealing with the social duties. When thou considerest thy wants, when thou beholdest thy imperfections, acknowledge his goodness, O son of humanity, who honored thee with humanity, endowed thee with speech, and placed thee in society to receive and confer reciprocal helps. Reciprocal helps. What goes around comes around type of thing. Reciprocal helps and mutual obligations, protections from injuries, thy enjoyments of the comforts. Please mute. Please mute Islam Karmisha, Islam.
Islam Moors.
Who else came in here? Islam. Somebody. All right. I'm gonna run it back from the top. We're dealing with holy instructions from the Prophet, dealing with social duties. When thou consider thy wants, when thou beholdest thy imperfections, acknowledge his goodness, O son of humanity, who honored thee with humanity, endowed thee with speech, and placed thee in society to receive and confer reciprocal helps and mutual obligations, protections from injuries, thy enjoyments of the comforts of the pleasures of life. All these thou owest to the assistance of others, and couldst not enjoy but in the bands of society. It is the duty, therefore, to be a friend to mankind, as it is thy interest that man should be friendly to thee. As the rose breath sweetness from its own nature, so the heart of a benevolent man produce good works. Produce good works. Benevolent man produceth good works. He enjoyeth the ease and tranquility of his own breast, and rejoiceth in the happiness and prosperity of his neighbor. He enjoyeth and rejoiceth the happiness and prosperity of his neighbor. He openeth not his ear unto slander. He opened not his ear unto slander. The faults and the failings of men give a pain to his heart. His desire is to do good, and he researcheth out the occasions thereof, in removing the oppression of another. He relieveth himself. In removing the oppression of another, he relieveth himself. From the largeness of his mind, he comprehendeth in his wishes the happiness of all men. And from generosity of his heart, he endeavored or attempted to promote it. Social duties, some bullet points or summarization, highlights, be a friend to mankind. Benevolent man produceth good works. Ear not open to slander. These are bullet points. The faults and failings of men give pain to his heart. You hear somebody take a fall, you hear something happen bad. You're not going on, you're not gonna, beat them way down like, oh man, told him not to, told him we shouldn't have did all that. Nah. These are social duties. His desire is to do good. These are bullet points. And any questions on that before we transition to where we left off, dealing with the civics aspect? I'll stop it. No question. No questions on social duties. And please let me know if you can still see the screen. But I know sometimes I transition and it leaves off on where I was last at.
Screen's live.
It's live, okay. Appreciate you.
And I don't have a question, but kind of like a comment. I think that a lot of us already move in that way. And that's why some of us, it's hard to leave, family members or part of our past behind who aren't doing the work, because we want to see good in everybody. We want everybody to succeed, in that way. So it could be a hindrance too. I mean, a lot of how we got into what we're in now is because we were too good natured and too trusting with the colonists and everyone else.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I agree. Islam Ali Khan Bey. Who else came in here?
Islam.
Islam Moors.
Hey,
Yeah. I'm Maroon here. But yeah, no, I feel you on that. But nonetheless, the aspirations to strive towards having the character of what we just read is the goal. It's rough, it's definitely rough.
Ashe.
Amaru Islam.
Islam, traveling right now.
Islam.
They traveling, man.
Islam Noble, yep, travel light.
Islam. All right. So everybody mute to have something to say about what we're about to get into. So we left off on the Fourth Amendment. We're going to pick it back up on the Fifth Amendment, or the Fifth Bill of Rights. Verbatim. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in land or naval forces or in the militia, when the actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense twice. Shall any person be subject to the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against themselves, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or the pursuit. I often say the pursuit of happiness, life and liberty or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. I want private property to be highlighted in everybody's mind, due process of law to be highlighted in everybody's mind as we move forward. Most of us know about pleading the fifth in general, as far as not saying anything, and of course can't get tried twice, which would be called double jeopardy. Most people know that. But things to keep in your mind: indictment by a grand jury for a crime. All crimes, if somebody's saying it's a crime, it must be indictment papers. Where are the indictment papers? So these are things to keep in your mind. Now let's analyze the Fifth Amendment. So capital was one of the language used in the Fifth Amendment. Law definition of capital. Now, the word may have different meanings when used in their different connections. Commissioner of Corporations and Taxation, it may mean actual property or estate. Aggregate of property. All capital invested plus surplus or undivided profits. Amount or value of property up to a par value of paid up to issued shares or stated value of no par shares. Assets, dealing with capital, still dealing with capital. Condemnation award, contributions by partners. Dividends earned before creation of trust. Dividends received by trustee, stockholder, and liquidation of corporation. Extraordinary dividends paid on reducing value of stock. Case law. Gain from sale of realty, still dealing with capital. Islam, Jerry Bay, and Wardell.
Islam, Morris, Steve.
Islam. No, Morris.
So we're still dealing with the law definition of capital. Means contributed by share owners. Money invested at interest. Money required of partners of agreement. Money which one adventures in an undertaking, paid up issues shares of stock. Place where legislative department holds its sessions and where chief offices of the executive are located. Still dealing with the law definition of capital. Political and governmental metropolis, preferred stock received as dividend. Principal sum of a fund of money. Proceeds of sale or exchange of capital of trust property, case law. Property, repayment of debt. Right, so now all different definitions of capital. Now, seat of government, stock dividends, subscribe, paid up capital. Sum formed when profits apportioned to building and loan association shares coalesce with dues paid, case law. Some total of corporate stock, surplus used as capital. Unamortized debt, discounts and expense, still dealing with capital. In political economy, that portion of the produce of industry existing in a country, which may be made directly available, either for the support of human existence or for the facilitation of production. The term does not embrace temporary loans. Still dealing with capital, because that was the language in the Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Bill of Rights. Income is the fruit of capital. Capital is the source of income. As to what is moneyed capital in a federal act respecting state taxation of a national bank stock. Now, capital in an adjective sense. Affecting or relating to the head or life of a person, entailing the ultimate penalty, right? Like a capital crime or capital, etc. Principal, leading, chief. So now capital assets. All capital invested plus surplus or undivided profits, case law to support. Assets of a permanent or fixed nature, or employed in carrying on business or trade. Goodwill. Still dealing with capital. Property acquired and held for profit or investment for more than 2 years. Title to property held for profit. Capital case or crime, one in for which death penalty may, but need not necessarily be inflicted. So that's back to using capital in a sense of capital crime or capital punishment. Capital expenditure costs of construction made with expectation of existence for an indefinite period. Expenditure in nature of an investment for the future. Right, so if whoever doesn't know what expenditure means, it's basically an expense. So if you're going to spend money on something that's going to make you more money, you just invest it in capital. Continuing, capital gains. Additions to principal, gains from sale of capital assets in excess of appraisal values or costs. Capital impairment, reduction of assets of corporation below aggregate of outstanding shares of capital stock. Case law to support. Capital increase, an increase not attributable to earnings. Capital investment, acquisition price of a capital asset. Case law. This is an interesting case law. Commissioner of Internal Revenue versus Rowan Drilling Company. Interesting one. Still on capital investment. Capital stock, surplus and undivided profits. Money spent to increase an asset. Back to what I just said earlier. Money spent to increase an asset. So you spending money to make a flip. You're going to spend 50 because that 50 going to make you 200, for example. Whatever that is capital. You invested in capital. Capital outlay. Money expended in acquiring, equipping, and promoting an expertise. Or an enterprise. Money expended, so you're spending money in acquiring, equipping, and promoting an enterprise. Capital outlay. Capital punishment, punishment of death, case law to support. Capital recovery, collection of charged off bad debt, where reserve account system is used. Case law to support. Capital stock. The term has various meanings. It may mean an amount fixed by charter to be subscribed and paid in or secured to be paid in by shareholders. Case law to support. And this is an interesting one because State XREL, Corin Realty Company. Notice how they're using XREL. So Moores ain't the only one. This is a law term. This means X relation. You have information on the straw. And here's an example of how people use this every day. Continuing with capital stock. Amount of stock that corporation may issue. Amount subscribed, contributed, or secured to be paid in. Case law to support. Corporate assets or property. Still dealing with capital stock. Corporate assets or property. It's capital stock. Evidence of rights in property. So the evidence that you own something is capital stock. It's a value. It has value. Continuing with capital stock. Fund employed in carrying on business or enterprise. liability of the corporation to its shareholders after creditors' claims have been liquidated. Case law to support. And once again, Department of Treasury of Indiana versus Crowder. Come on, man. Valuation of the corporation as a business enterprise. Capital stock tax. Tax on privilege of doing business. Capital surplus. Property paid into corporation by shareholders in excess of capital stock liability. Commissioners of corporations and taxation. Law definition of criminal, because that was the language in the Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Bill of Rights. Law definition of criminal. Noun. One who has committed a criminal offense. One who has been legally convicted of a crime. Legally convicted of a crime. Or judged guilty of a crime. Synonymous with the word crook. Criminal in an adjective sense. That which pertains to or is connected with the law of crimes or the administration of penal justice, or which relates to or has character of crime. Case law to support. The word is defined as of the nature of or involving a crime, more generally of the nature of a grave offense or wicked. Criminal act. Now keep in mind, when we read earlier, we're saying, you know, somebody did something wrong. By definition of law, that's what makes somebody a criminal. So back to case law, such as Sherrod versus Cullen, it needs to be an injured party. It needs to be due process. It needs to be signed affidavits being, you know, signed with ink signature, indictment papers. If none of those things are taking place, and then there's no crime. So therefore, a person can't be a criminal unless, you know, due process has took its place, and it was determined that by a jury of the peers. All right. So criminal act, a term which is equivalent to a crime, or is sometimes used with a slight softening or glossing of the meaning, or as importing a possible question of the legal guilt of the deed. The intentional violation of statute designed to protect human life is a criminal act. Criminal action. The proceeding by which a party charged with a public offense is accused and brought to trial, and punishment is known as a criminal action. Criminal action is one, an action prosecuted by the state as a party against a person charged with a public offense. And that's interesting, public offense, that's interesting. So we're talking about quasi-municipal right now. And they're saying a public offense. And that the reason why that's ringing bells with me in my head, because when I hear public, I already know, based on looking at the charter of these municipalities, that they use this language, public municipal corporation. So that's why that's standing out to me. And they're telling you that, you know, they got board members, you know, they got elected officials. And if you're not working for the city of whatever, you're not an employee of the city of whatever the municipal corporation is calling itself, then you're not part of that, you know. But moving forward, 2, an action prosecuted by the state at the instance of an individual to prevent an apprehended crime against his person or property, criminal assault and battery. An accused may be guilty of a criminal assault and battery if he intentionally does an act which by reason of its wants and grossly negligent character exposes another to personal injury and in fact causes injury. Case law to support. Criminal case. An action, suit, or cause instituted to punish an infraction of the criminal laws. The phrase has various meanings according to the context and purpose of constitutional provision or statute. Criminal charge. An accusation of a crime formulated in a written complaint. So keep in mind, we're reading the law definition of criminal, broken down criminal next to charge. So to be charged for something criminal, once again, the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, and you know what I mean? So accusation of a crime, that means a human being said you did something. Formulated in a written complaint. That's the written affidavit. So a human being wrote an affidavit saying you did something, signed it, grand jury, indicted, and that's the start of the due process. So they're saying in the definition of criminal charge, the elements to be charged, they're telling you right here, these things must take place. And most of the time, these things aren't being taken place. And the people don't know to bring this up. Like, hold on. Skipping steps here. You know what I mean? So once again, an accusation of a crime formulated in a written complaint, information, or indictment. Indictment, right? That's the language in the Fifth Amendment, right? And taking shape in a prosecution. Criminal contempt proceeding. Criminal contempt proceedings are brought to preserve the power and vindicate the dignity and integrity of the court and to punish for disobedience of his orders. Criminal court. One where criminal cases are tried and determined, not one where civil cases are tried, or persons charged with criminal offenses are held for action by proper authority. Proper authority, that's the key part, proper authority. And that's back to the Article 3, Section 2 and 1. Delegation of authority, proven inferior court status, or just simply credentials that they've been sworn in and took oath to the Constitution. Proper authority. Criminal information. A criminal suit brought without interposition of a grand jury. It's funny how this grand jury keep popping up, ain't it? Indictment by the grand jury, right? Criminal information. A criminal suit brought without interposition of a grand jury by the proper officer of the king or state. Criminal. No.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It has to do with proper authority.
Mhm.
Even if they swear in and take oaths, don't we still have them on jurisdiction as far as being proper authority of the land or whatever they're trying to say there, imposing on us?
Yeah, because if they're saying that they did, if there's documentation that whoever in question did take an oath, and it's like in City Hall or the county clerk, and they got their signature and all that, then what that's saying is that they took a contract to the Constitution, and then what that's saying is they took a contract to the treaty because that's Article 6.
Thanks.
You know what I mean? So it's like a domino effect.
Yep.
So yeah, Islam. All right. Let me see. Where I leave off at. Criminal instrumentality rule, where the wrong is accomplished by a crime. The crime and not the negligent act of the party which made it possible is the proximate cause. Criminal intent, the intent to commit a crime. Malice, as evidenced by a criminal act. An intent to deprive or defraud the true owner of his property. Criminal intent. Criminal malversation, a broad category of corrupt official practices. That's heavy right there. Criminal motive. Criminal motive is the inducement existing in the minds of persons, causing them to intend and afterward to commit crime. I'll run that back. Criminal motive is the inducement existing in the minds of persons, causing them to intend and afterward to commit crime. Criminal procedure, the method pointed out by law for the apprehension, trial, or prosecution, and fixing the punishment of those persons who have broken or violated, or are supposed to have broken or violated the laws prescribed for the regulation of the conduct of the people of the community, and who have thereby laid themselves liable to fine, imprisonment, or other punishment. But once again, injured party. When you start talking about regulation of the conduct of the people of the community, people, or people making complaints talking about they injured or not. That's really the anchor. Criminal proceeding, criminal proceeding. One instituted and conducted for the purpose either of preventing the commission of a crime or for fixing the guilt of a crime already committed and punishing the offender, as distinguished from a civil proceeding, which is for the redress of a private injury. Strictly, a criminal proceeding means some step taken before a court against some person or persons charged with some violation of the criminal law. Criminal process. Process which issues to compel a person to answer for a crime or misdemeanor. Criminal process. And this is like I say, in the their municipal courts, it's like a, if you there, you'll see that it's clearly a process. They're so like robotic in their thinking. When you come in there and disrupt that in the common law, international law perspective, as Moors come into court, it fries their mind, because they're so systematic with the process of boom, 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 you do this, you do that. They even want you to sign papers if you don't got a lawyer. Like as if you gotta ask them permission. You know what I'm saying? To handle your own affairs. But yeah, I kind of went off. That's where my mind went though. So criminal process. Process which issues to compel a person to answer for a crime or misdemeanor. Also process issued to aid in the detection or suppression of a crime, such as search warrants, the primary purpose of the search being to obtain evidence for use in a criminal prosecution. That's interesting. Criminal prosecution. An action or proceeding instituted in a proper court on behalf of the public. Key word, proper court on the behalf of the public for the purpose of securing the conviction and punishment of one accused of crime. A prosecution in a court of justice in name of the government against one or more individuals accused of a crime. Compensation. That was the language in the Fifth Amendment, Fifth Bill of Rights. Law definition, compensation. Indemnification, payment of damages, making amends, making whole, giving an equivalent or substitute of equal value, that which is necessary to restore an injured party. That which is necessary to restore an injured party to his former position. Consideration, which is a law term for something of value exchanged in a contract. Consideration, or price of privilege purchase. Equivalent in money for a loss sustained. Equivalent given for property. Taken or for an injury done to another. Still dealing with compensation. Giving back an equivalent in either money, which is but the measure of value, or an actual value otherwise conferred. Recompense in value. Recompense or award for some loss, injury, or service, especially when it is given by statute. Remuneration for the injury directly and proximately caused by a breach of contract or duty, right? So breach of contract, the treaty's a contract, the Constitution's a contract. So when you're basing your claim, you're saying the contract was violated, which will be called a tort. And now the bullet points of the injuries, which lead to mental distress, which lead to, you're saying genocide, you're saying, right, deprivation of rights under color of law and all these things based on the breach of contract. All that's based on breach of contract. Or duty, because of the contract, right? So duty. Remuneration or satisfaction for injury or damage of every description. That return which is given for something else. An act which a court orders to be done, or money which a court or other tribunal orders to be paid by a person whose acts or omissions have caused loss or injury to another, in order that thereby the persons damnified may receive equal value for his loss or be made whole in respect of his injury. Still dealing with compensation. Compensation is a misleading term and is used merely for lack of a word more nearly expressing the thought of the law, which permits recovery for an imponderable and intangible thing for which there is no money equivalent. Case law. The word compensation, as used in the Workmen's Compensation Acts, means the money relief afforded an injured employee or his departments according to the scale established and for the persons designated in the act, and not the compensatory damages recoverable in an action of law for a wrong done or a contract broken. As used in Workmen's Compensation Acts, compensation is distinguishable from benefits. The former applying to allowance, where the employee is only injured. You got something to say, Wardell? There's accident?
Yeah, my bad, accident.
or Islam. Or the employee is only injured, and the latter applying in a case of death. So as used in Workmen's Comp Act or Workmen's Compensation Acts, compensation is distinguishable from benefits. The former applying to an allowance where the employee is only injured, and the latter applying in case of death. The term compensation may include funeral benefits. Also, that equivalent in money, which is paid to the owners and occupiers of lands taken or injuriously affected by the exercise of the power of eminent domain. In the constitutional provision for just compensation for property taken under the power of eminent domain, this term means a payment in money. Any benefit to the remaining property of the owner arising from public works for which a part has been taken cannot be considered as compensation. Case law. As compared with consideration and damages, compensation in its most careful use seems to be between them. Consideration is amends for something given by consent or by the owner's choice. Damages is amends exacted from a wrongdoer for a tort. I was talking about a tort or earlier. Compensation is amends for something which has taken without the owner's choice, yet without commission of a tort. Thus, one should say consideration for land sold, compensation for land taken for a railway, damages for a trespass. But such distinctions are not uniform. Land damages is a common expression for compensation for lands taken for public use. So lands taken for public use or land damages, they're in that category. So I'm not sure if everybody knows what eminent domain means, but the municipality will come, so they want to build an airport or something. Or how it might be a house right there, or they want to build a mall or whatever. They say, they want to build over your stuff. So it's land damages. And they'll try to, throw you an offer or whatever. Okay. Compensation is distinguishable from damages in as much as the former may mean the sum which will remunerate an owner for land actually taken, while the latter signifies an allowance made for injury to the residue. But such distinction is not ordinarily observed. The ordinary meaning of the term compensation as applied to officers is remuneration in whatever form it may be given, whether it be salaries and fees or both combined. Case law. It is broad enough to include other remuneration for official services. Here's another ex-rel, state ex-rel, Emmons versus Farmer, such as mileage or traveling expenses, and also the repayment of amounts expended. But the term is not necessarily synonymous with salary. A quote-unquote reasonable compensation is that which will fairly compensate the laborer when the character of the work and the effectiveness and ability entering into the service are considered. Compensation is not synonymous with pension, which is ordinarily a gratuity from the government or some of its subordinate agencies in recognition of, but not in payment for, past services. The civil, Scotch, and French law recoupment set off the meeting of two debts due by two parties, where the debtor in the one debt is the creditor in the other. That is to say, where one person is both debtor and creditor to the other, and therefore, to the extent of what is due to him, claims allowance out of the sum that he is due. In order for compensation, quote unquote, to take place, the two debts must exist simultaneously and have as their object the payment of a sum of money or a sum of quantity of consumable things of one and the same kind, and the debts must be equally liquidated and demandable. Compensation is of the three kinds: legal or by operation of law, compensation by way of expectation, and by reconvention. Law definition of deprived, because that was the language in the Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Bill of Rights. Deprived, to take. The term has its meaning in a constitutional provision that no person shall be deprived of his property without due process of law, and denotes a taking altogether, a seizure, a direct appropriation, dispossession of the owner. Case law Brown versus the City of Atlanta. Grand jury, that was the language in the Fifth Bill of Rights, Fifth Amendment. Grand jury, a jury of inquiry who are summoned and returned by the sheriff to each session of the criminal courts, and whose duty is to receive complaints and accusations in criminal cases, hear the evidence adduced on the part of the state, and find bills of indictment. In cases where they are satisfied a trial ought to be had, they are first sworn and instructed by the court. This is called a grand jury because it comprises a greater number of jurors than the ordinary trial jury or petit jury. At common law, a grand jury consisted of not less than 12, nor more than 23 men, and is still the rule in many of the states, though in some, the number is otherwise fixed by statute, which is colorable. Thus, in Oregon and Utah, the grand jury is composed of 7 men. In South Dakota, not less than 6, nor more than 8. In Texas, 12. In Idaho, 16. In Washington, 12 to 17. In North Dakota, 16 to 23. In California, 19. And in Mexico, 21. Case law. Law definition of indictment, because that was the language in the Fifth Amendment, the Fifth Bill of Rights. Indictment, an accusation in writing, found and presented by a grand jury, legally convoked and sworn to the court in which it is impaneled, charging that a person therein named has done some acts or been guilty of some omission which by law is a public offense punishable on indictment. Case law to support. A presentment differs from an indictment in that it is an accusation made by a grand jury of their own motion, either upon their own observation and knowledge or upon evidence before them, while an indictment is preferred at the suit of the government and is usually framed in the first instance by the prosecuting officer of the government and by him laid before the grand jury to be found or ignored. And information resembles in its form and substance an indictment, but is filed at the mere discretion of the proper law officer of the government without the intervention or approval of a grand jury, and an affidavit is a charge made and preferred by an individual. In Scotch law, the form of process by which a criminal is brought to trial at the instance of the Lord Advocate, where a private party is a principal prosecutor. He brings his charge in what is termed the form of criminal letters. Joint indictment. When several offenders are joined in the same indictment, as when principals in the first and second degree and accessories before and after the fact, all are joined in the same indictment. Indictment for felony is against the peace of our Lord the King, his crown and dignity in the general, and not against his individual person, because in England, there is no interregnum. Infamous. That was the language in the Fifth Bill of Rights. Infamous. Shameful or disgraceful. Infamous crime. A crime which entails infamy upon one who has committed it. The term infamous without fame or good report was applied at common law to certain crimes upon the conviction of which a person became incompetent to testify as a witness, upon the theory that a person would not commit so heinous a crime unless he was so deprived as to be worthy of credit. These crimes are treason, felony, and the criminicide, a crime punishable by imprisonment in the state prison or penitentiary without hard labor, is an infamous crime. Within the provision of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Case law, Mack versus US. It is not the character of the crime, but the nature of the punishment which renders the crime infamous. The nature of the punishment renders the crime infamous. That's heavy right there. Whether an offense is infamous depends on the punishment which may be imposed thereof, not on the punishment which was imposed. Under the Constitution of Rhode Island, a crime to be infamous must come with the crimson falsely, within the crimson falsity, such as forgery, perjury, subordination of perjury, offenses affecting the public administration of justice, or such as would affect civil or political rights, disqualifying or rendering a person incompetent to be a witness. By revised statutes of New York, the term infamous crime, when used in any statute, is directed to be construed as including every offense punishable with death or by imprisonment in a state prison and no other. So it's interesting when it's talking about statutes and stuff, which is clearly colorable, directed to be construed. So the people involved with enforcing these municipal law policies, they're directed to construe things a certain way in their favor. It's not even necessary law. It's not even necessarily going through due process. you know. So the people got to really be on their ass, you know. They're some slicksters. Law definition of presentment, because I was the language in the Fifth Amendment. Presentment, criminal practice. The written notice taken by a grand jury of any offense from their own knowledge or observation without any bill of indictment laid before them at the suit of the government. Presentments are also made in courts leet and courts baron before the stewards. The writing which contains the accusation so presented by a grand jury. Presentment, right? In an extended sense, the term includes not only presentments properly so-called, but also inquisitions of office and indictments found by a grand jury. An informal statement in writing by the grand jury representing to the court that a public offense has been committed, which is triable in the country, and that there is reasonable ground for believing that a particular individual named or described therein has committed it. An accusation of a crime made by a grand jury from their own knowledge or from evidence furnished them by witnesses or by one or more of their members. And as we always close out, it's always questions to ask yourself and reflect on. You know, one, what is the first order as it relates to the people of the Fifth Bill of Rights? Two, does this happen prior to arrest pursuant to the Fifth Bill of Rights? Three, what must be obtained prior to any action? Four, are there any expectations to the initial procedures of the Fifth Bill of Rights? Five, can anyone be charged with the same crime twice? What is this called? Six, what is it that the people cannot be compelled to do in any criminal case? Give an example of how the people are compelled to do this today. 7, is there any deprivations that can be imposed on the people pursuant to the Fifth Bill of Rights? What is protected? Give an example of something that is protected. What might you call that which is protected? So ask yourself, can you answer these questions? Everybody on this Zoom, be honest with yourself and ask yourself, can you answer those 7 questions? The purpose of the Fourth Bill of Rights is to secure people from who? And overall, assure them from what? And I'm gonna stop right there. Stop right there, take questions, statements, anything that stood out.